In the name of the true and living God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit.
Amen.
As you may have noticed, I am not Father Duncan. Father Duncan is on his sabbatical. We'll talk about that a little bit later in the sermon. My name is Dan Aid, and I am the retired dean of the cathedral in Los Angeles, and I moved to Huntington Bay in October, and I usually sit in the back. So it's nice to be up here with you all, and I'll be here for most of the summer. Well, for all of the summer, actually. So it's good to be here on this day of Trinity Sunday. If you have come expecting a full-body explanation of the mystery of the Trinity, I'm going to disappoint you. We, as the Church, almost from its very inception, have been thinking about this mystery of the Trinity. And the fathers and mothers of the Church, the great lights of our thinking, have not been looking to get some sort of absolute nailed down, absolute definition of what it is, how it works, but they came forth first from their experience. What has God done for the Church? What has God done for God's people? What is God doing for God's people? What will God do for God's people? What is God doing in my own life? How do I understand the working of God in my life and in the life of my people? That's the meditation. It's not a hardcore theological meditation. It's about how I experience God. And one of the main places, both in the church in the East and the West, where people sort of meditate on this mystery of the Trinity, is an icon by Andrei Rublev. And he wrote this icon in the 14th century. Now, Claire's going to help me again, my assistant Deacon Claire. Now, the Church has used this icon and thought about it and prayed about it since the 14th century. And volumes have been written about it. And the meditation goes on because at different times it's been changed, which sort of shocked me. When it was restored, things were actually changed. But the original intent is exactly the same. This is a representation of the hospitality of Abraham. Abraham and his wife Sarah are at their home. God has promised Abraham a child he's going to be the father of many nations. But he and Sarah are very old people. So is the promise fallow? So these men come one day. And Abraham, in the tradition, rushes out to them to offer them hospitality. And they say to him, and they realize all of a sudden, oh, well, this is not just like three guys. This is the Lord. This is the invisible God made visible. Oh. And they're told that you are going to bear a child, and that child will change everything. And the Church, in its meditation, said, I wonder if the work of the Trinity is like this sort of creative process, this God creating where nothing can be created, the impossible becomes possible. God changing things in the life of the Church and in the world and in my life. Perhaps it's like that. But for today, there's one thing primarily that I want you to think about. In its meditation, the Church has said, well, this is probably the very moment the three figures that are looking at each other, that the promised child is created. And that has served as an icon for all all of the creative powers of God. This is the work of creation. But look at the figures. They're also in repose. Work and relaxation. Work and rest. Claire will come back later. Thank you, Deacon Claire. Work and rest. And in that beautiful, long, long, long story of creation, we're told some very important things. That God uses all of God's self to create. And out of the chaos, he brings order. But it's an order of equality. It's day and night, light and darkness, sea and air, water and land. He separates things in equality. The very first thing God separates and then consecrates is time. And God is the Lord of all time. And time is sanctified. In some ways, that's our work, sanctifying time. And the last thing in creation that God does is that God rests. God works and sees that the work is good, and then God rests. Work and rest. The rest is not outside of the created order. It is central to the created order. It is consecrated. Rest is one way to be with God. Now that's a countercultural thing because we are all like go, 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 go people. But rest, not inactivity, but rest in God is part of the created order, and it's consecrated. It's Sabbath. Your rector is not on vacation. He's not on vacation. He is on your hardworking rector. I know a lot of priests. He's a very hardworking guy. He is not on vacation. He is on Sabbath. And there's a difference. There's a difference. I think the best explanation of Sabbath that I've ever been given was many, many years ago when I was a young man. I was visiting a friend who worked in, I think it was Albert Einstein Medical Hospital, and he's a resident there, and he lived in the housing for residents. And I went there on a Friday, and it was a Sabbath, and I got in the elevator, and a woman got in with me, but I did not read the sign. It was a Shabbat elevator. Now, that's an elevator that because of the Sabbath, faithful Jewish people do not work on the Sabbath, the elevator opened and closed on every floor. I was going to the 23rd floor. By like 7, I was so exasperated. I said, well, probably I won't tell you everything I said, but I said, this is just so stupid. And like most young men, I was not able to edit myself. And this Orthodox woman looked at me, and she rose up in all of her grandmotherly authority, and she said, this is not stupid. This is a Shabbat elevator. You might think it's stupid, but this allows me, even in the simple act of removing myself from pushing that button, to put myself in the presence of God and remember what God is doing for me and my people and the people I love. I'm in God's presence. She said, have you ever thought about God in an elevator before? And I said, no, ma'am. And she said, today is the day. Pay attention And then we went back to our staring at the numbers. Little did she know that she would be in sermons for the next 30 years, but it's true. We don't think of Sabbath. We think of blue laws and all, but do we think of resting with God because what God has done? Do we rest in an active way with God? That woman knew what Sabbath was because she knew the scriptures, I'm sure. In Exodus, in the last sort of God and Moses are having this talk, and the crescendo of their talk is keep the Sabbath. And in Exodus, it says something I find amazing. It's that God rested on the Sabbath. Now, this is the Lord of all creation, the being that holds the cosmos together. God rested on the Sabbath and was refreshed. God was refreshed. And it's an odd word that's sort of like God, it's hard in English. God reflected on God's self and what God had done, and his soul, God's soul, was renewed. The word is he was resouled. Sabbath rest. Even God needs to be resouled. I think if we live under the guidance of the Lord of all time, we have to be honest about where we are in our lives as a church. Not just this church, but pretty much all churches. I can remember the first Easter of COVID. I had Easter Sunday Mass in my living room, and I was sort of zoomed out, and I thought, the light of the church is going to go out. I mean, we have been through a very traumatic time, a difficult time, but always in God's presence. And all of us had to work to make that seem okay again. In the life of most priests and congregations, we live on a program year, September to June. So this is the program year, 22, 23, where it's all going to be back to normal again. We're having a normal Christmas, we're having a normal Easter, we're having a normal this. And in our anxiety, I think we might push ourselves too hard. The light of the church felt like it was going to go out. And we blew on the embers and got little sticks, and the fire grew. We threw branches on it, we threw wood. And the light seemed back. And in that light, we saw some things come back and some things not. We saw some people come back and others not. And in our anxiety, we felt we need to work and work and work and work and work to make it back to normal. It's exhausting. There is a person behind the scenes in all of Israel's meditation on the Sabbath. Do you know who that is? It's Pharaoh, who worked people literally and figuratively to death. And God's response is, people are not ground into nothingness for me. In fact, we are together in holy rest. We are together in Sabbath time. We are resouled together. And the way ahead, as Father Duncan said, I think last week, is unsure. It's unsure, but what is sure is that God is creating, God created, God will create tomorrow and after that. Where do we find our hope in this cycle of work and prayer and rest. Dean Claire?
I was resting.
Good. So, how many figures are there? No. There are 4. Where is the 4th figure? It's you. It's me. It's Claire. It's Father Duncan. It's all of us. There is a space here. It's for you. In this creative, life-giving, hospitable place, this is your place. And notice, there's a place for you. You don't have to bring the food. You don't have to clean the table. You don't have to cook. There's a place of rest, work and rest in the created order. Thank you, Claire. So we're going to have maybe a quieter summer, but it will be not a summer without inactivity, but it will be a Sabbath summer. And how blessed we are, most of us, to be in this verdant place, this beautiful place, both this church and this town and the area. I mean, coming from central Los Angeles, I feel like I'm in heaven. And perhaps together we are. So rest. Rest. Rest in God's hospitality and the good news that Jesus says to us, "Come unto me, all you are heavy laden, and I will give you rest."